Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Wynne's World of Numerology, a language that I believe our soul already knows. And when studied carefully, can help and lead us to soulganizing our lives rather than organizing our lives around that pesky little ego. I hope to be your self growth facilitator today. And if you're suffering in any way, I really hope to help you reorganize the way that you're feeling and experiencing your life. Today, we're going to dive into the last number symbol nine of one through nine. And you most likely haven't studied the number nine quite this way before, even if you're familiar with numerology. So let's get started. In previous episodes, we have learned the definition of symbols one through eight is just like the basic pure form of energy that they are, and how a bunch of different factors will affect our ability to bring it to its highest potential or sometimes sadly to its lowest potential. And just to recap, the number one is about making a new beginning, a masculine type of impact or mark on the world. And by the way, 2026 is going to be that year. The number two is the feminine counterpart to number one. It's there to support that masculine one sort of initiative. The number three is one plus two is three. So we have the masculine and the feminine coming together to make that baby. So the number three is that childlike energy that is so fun and curious. The number four is all about kind of settling that number three down, getting it to create order out of chaos and, basically develop digestible buckets of information for us to use in our daily lives. The number five then arrives to sort of break up all of that restriction and order and seek new adventures and change. And then we get to the number six. So we've had all our fun, and the number six is ready to dish out or bring in additional responsibility for themselves. And that could be for our fellow man in some way, family. That can be, what I do as a counselor, as a helper. And then the number seven is our first attempt to sort of rest, contemplate, look back on life and see its mystery and all of its sacredness and reflect on it for a greater understanding. And the eight comes in as like this sort of new powerhouse after all of that reflection to really, a lot of times the eight will try to achieve personal gain once it has all of this sort of one through seven wisdom. Or as a leader, it will try to create powerful situations for others. And that leaves us to the nine, which is our last number. And it's sort of the closure to what we began way back in that one cycle, right? So it's sort of the closure and the lover of all things and all of humanity. The six is sort of a personal love. And as you're going to find out, the nine is our impersonal form of love for all of humans. All right, so we normally start by drawing the solar cross and then the number inside that cross. Again, we have the four quadrants and we'll go through each one. So first I'm going to draw the number. So as you can see, the nine is completely hugging the spirit quadrant. It is, considered sort of the highest form of all the numbers. It's kind of the completer, but also again, like coming from the highest consciousness that we can obtain. So spiritually, what we do next is we go around the solar cross this way. So we're going to come down here and talk about how the nine is affected in this spiritual quadrant. And basically, spiritually, we are going to feel connected to every human. We're going to consider the needs of the whole human family, not just our personal family or things that we care or people we care about in our community. So the nine is going to have an impersonal love. It will try its best not to hold any grievance towards others, seeing everyone as a soul, as a spirit first, right? And so any of the behaviors that go along with that are not true to who that person or soul really is, but just something that maybe can be corrected or be given some sort of resource or, something from our soul where we give, light or love to that person. The nine will also just basically spiritually become like a chameleon, trying to become whatever the person needs when they are with them. All right, then we're going to go through the physical body quadrant. And nines are very much into body suffering, right? So they will experience the suffering of others just in their imagination and project it into the body. So, for example, if they're like drinking clean water and they're feeling, drinking water in their body, they'll say, oh, all people should have clean drinking water. And there's probably something that I can do about that. So the nine will always pursue where they see scarcity and try to redirect resources in a much more humane and total human family way. My son has nines all over his chart. And he one day just told me he pictured, where are people suffering? And he pictured people in a jail. And so the first thing he did right after that was to go and volunteer for books for prisoners, trying to send them some amount of love from an impersonal person that they'll never meet. So it's that kind of a feeling that nines just can't escape. And they very much want to alleviate the pain in physical bodies or people feeling isolated or things like that. All right, next we're going to move to the emotions. And, nines just truly understand that love is the most powerful emotion, not because of comfort, but because it truly is the expression of shared unity among all humans. Again, that impersonal love that we're always talking about. Nines have this ability to sort of receive love within them first and become the giver to others. And so they're sort of fulfilled already because they received love like through the universe, not through another human, or is not looking for that all the time. And again, they're not going to give it out selectively. They just think, okay, whoever needs it will, be the receiver. So, like as stated with the physical body, the nine will want to walk whoever's available to the water and have them have that water, but not say, like, oh, I need to get clean drinking water for these people over here because I care more about them. The nine doesn't emotionally do that. All right. And then we're going to move into the final quadrant, the mental quadrant. And in A Course in Miracles text, Jesus says that miracles are the effects of thought, and that thought can make a lower order, which we would call the ego, or create the higher order. And he goes on to distinguish between, like, the ego is going to be caught up in intellectualizing and separating things out, and true thinking will be from this spiritual perspective of considering the whole family and knowing that you can always share love with whoever is in front of you with even just a thought, right? You can just think good things for the person in front of you, and the nine will know that the universe will respond to that. All right, next we usually talk about karma. And when under the influence of the nine, numerology is not calculating the karma. But as always, where every number is subject to that psychological ego. And I would say that the nine probably receives the most difficulty with the ego, because the ego is demanding that we become special, to pick special things, to become a personal identity, to be a personal brand, whatever those things are. And that's in direct conflict with the nine. The nine is basically saying you can't have this viewpoint of yourself. It's not appropriate for loving all of humanity, picking out specialness. So it's really, really difficult. And I often hear that nines don't feel comfortable. They don't know who they are. They don't have a sense of themselves, which is good for doing good works in the world, but it's bad for when people are asking you all the time, like, what do you like? What are you into? Like, what, so sometimes nines will just end up becoming very righteous and just will attach themselves to an ideal as the ego. Like, this ideal is the one true ideal that everyone should follow. Like, imagine a righteous preacher yelling at everyone about they're going to go to hell if they don't do exactly what, the right thing is to do. Or you might have an annoying friend who's constantly telling you, like, recycle that or do this, like constantly just obsessed with you're affecting everyone else all the time. So think about that. Like, nines will often, the ego of the nine will often be very judgmental in that way. So luckily for us, free will gives us the ability to reverse this upside down relationship that the ego creates with us and whatever number we're under. Again, the nine will need to use a lot of free will to dissolve these aspects of the personal self before doing works in the world. So it's very difficult to intellectually understand you can be a individual without feeling a sense of a personal identity. Like that's just very difficult to talk about, but it is what the nine's ultimate goal is meant to do. It's quite difficult, but possible. And it leads to imagination and creativity beyond what most people will reach because they're not thinking about anything special. They're thinking what's best for humanity. And the soul will understand this, right? The soul will be able to look at the higher consciousness and say, in the broader circle of life, this is probably where you should put your energy right now. And so, knowing where the nine is in your chart is really, really helpful. And specifically, the nine is in all of our charts right now because 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 5, 2025 is a 9 year. So it's really very much a part of our lives right now. And so it's really important to note that in this 9 year, this 2025 9 year, that it's the ending of a cycle. And that cycle looks a little different when it's moving through time rather than just something in your chart. So in this ending year, we're not going to know what to clean up in our country if we don't look at it. You can't get rid of what you don't look at. So it's really hard to see the cockroaches under the fridge to know that they need to be cleaned out. And it's not pleasant to look at, but that's the only way you know. I feel like the best explanation for this 2025 year in America is we need to see everything. We need to see the evil. We need to see the ego. We need to see the activity in the world. And we have to go, this is a gift to be exposed to what it is that needs to be cleaned up. And then you need to acknowledge what part of it is for you to clean up. In your own life, you can simply do this by acknowledging your own anger, your own sadness, your own anxieties and fears, and what's inducing that, and let it go. If it's, the news, stop watching it. Believe that the 2026 year is on the way and that it's time to let go mostly of our emotional baggage, right? Or relationships that just like are very toxic or ego driven. It's time to let it go. And we want this room for 2026 in January to generate more positive light in the world and, have clean underbellies in our fridges with no cockroaches and no more of the ego driving our daily decisions. I hope that makes sense. And if you want to go deeper at all with learning about the nine and how it shows up in your personal chart, you can always book a session with me. You can go over your questions about your own numerology chart if you read your own chart, or I can go over the chart as I see it for you. And as always, included in a session is access to the free copy of my ebook. It's called Soulganize Your Life. You can also just go to soulganize.com to click on the contact me page. And lastly, all the links to anything about the episode are below if you want to jump around. Thanks so much for hanging in with me this 2025 year and learning about the basic 1 through 9 number symbols. It's been an honor to share what I believe is true about this as a language of the soul. So thanks again, and I hope to see you in 2026.